Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jenny and I'm here today to do the non-fiction booktube tag that was created by Olive at a Book Olive. I was super intrigued to do this tag because I think that Olive is undertaking a really great mission, and that is to try to increase the exposure of nonfiction content creators on Booktube, and also just increase the general dialogue about reading nonfiction. So I decided to jump on in and give you my 2 cents on this tag. I have my notes down here just in case you see me looking down. How much nonfiction do you read is the first question. So I went over about 3 years and looked at my stats, and it ranges from about 25 to 30% of my reading per year. And I'm happy with that number. I think that's good for me right now. I try to include one nonfiction book a month in my reading, but it also has a lot to do with just my general status with a lot of other things, how much nonfiction I read. I tend to read more nonfiction when I'm doing research for my artwork, and so, or research for videos, but that's another question, so I'll save that. So I think that's pretty much where I will stay for now. I might try to get it up to 40%. We'll see how the next year, 2020, progresses, and see if I increase it at any rate. What kind of nonfiction videos do I make? I mostly include nonfiction in my videos in the same way that I do fiction. So I can include them in my reading vlogs. They are often part of my TBRs for each month and my wrap-ups for each month. I haven't necessarily been doing those each month consistently in the year I've been on Booktube so far, but I think that I'm going to incorporate them more regularly now that I've kind of established myself and feel that I understand the type of videos I'm going to make. I do like having that regularity there, so you can probably look forward to hearing about at least one nonfiction book per month, and it's possible that there will be more especially in things like Nonfiction November. What is my favorite nonfiction subgenre? But hands down, that is memoir. A well-done memoir can just hit you in all the right places in terms of a reading experience. Memoir has a really amazing way of connecting you with a person, and so that is always what I'm trying to do, whether I'm reading fiction or nonfiction, and so memoir is, to me, the best genre for that. I also really enjoy biography, and if a biography is done well, it can give you that same feeling that a memoir can. What is my favorite nonfiction book? This was a hard choice because I do have a lot that I really like, but for this prompt I'm going to pick Crow Planet, Essential Wisdom from the Urban Wilderness by Lyanda Lynn Haupt. I think this book, I have mentioned this book several times on my channel, and I just want to keep mentioning it because it's a small press that put this out. It's a Pacific Northwest author from Seattle, and I just adored so much about this book. Lyanda Lynn Haupt is able to give you factual information about crows while also tying you into her world, and there's nothing flashy or exciting going on. She's just living her life, but she's living it with respect to the crows that she's studying in this book. And the things she says, she shares some beautiful anecdotes, and her writing is very lyrical, and so it just ticked all the boxes for me, and I do consider it to be one of my top reads ever, and certainly at this point my favorite nonfiction. The next question is, what keeps people from reading more nonfiction? I think a lot of people who've done this tag already have outlined a lot of the reasons really well. I think it's a matter of considering it to be something that's dry and formulaic and lacking in imagination. I think the key to good nonfiction is that there is a lot of imagination in it. Not necessarily in creating fantastical characters, but in being able to look at real life people, real life situations, real life objects, real life science, real life history, and conveying it in a way that is creative, imaginative, inspiring. I think that is something that people should give more chances to when they're considering reading nonfiction in an area that they're interested in. Why do I like nonfiction? I am very much a voyeur. I love learning about real people living their real lives, and I think that's one of the reasons why I love YouTube, is because it's real people creating content about their lives. And I love trying to understand myself better by understanding others, learning about others, learning about people who are super different from me, trying to assimilate all that into the human experience. All those reasons are reasons why I love nonfiction. The next question is, what is a nonfiction book that you read because of Booktube? And I picked City of Lies, Love, Sex, Death, and the Search for Truth in Tehran by Ramita Navai. I listened to this book on audio earlier this year, and I read it because of the buzzword readathon, because the buzzword was lies, and I was looking for an audiobook that I would be able to include in the readathon, and that was one that had that in the title. I never would have picked up this book if it wasn't for Booktube and that readathon. I definitely learned a lot in that book. It covers a lot of different types of people living in Tehran. Ramita Navai is a journalist who I believe grew up in the UK, but did a lot of work and traveling to Iran. And I just learned so much about the structure of the society, how much we make assumptions living in the West about the type of people that live in the Middle East, and I was very, very happy that I read it, and that I learned so much about a place that I really knew very little about. Next question is, what is the best nonfiction book you've read lately? And I'm cheating a little bit because I am going to talk about Seven Fallen Feathers by Tanya Talaga, which I have included in my TBR and which I am reading right now. And I am not even halfway in this book, but it is really, really well written, and I'm so glad I'm reading it. It's very hard subject matter, and somehow Tanya Talaga is able to convey this really difficult subject matter to you in a way that is very, you're able to digest it, you're able to accept it, you're able to keep reading. I do take breaks here and there because it is very traumatic, the subject matter about what's happened to these boys and what's happening to First Nations people, Indigenous culture in general in Canada. But again, it is so well written. I understand all the awards that this book has received because Talaga's writing style is just so fluid, and she conveys her own little snippets of her world in with the information she's trying to give you. She really fleshes out all of the people she's talking about and makes them full realized characters. Sometimes they're not even in her narrative very much, but somehow you feel like you know who they are and why she's included them in the book. So far, just stunning story. Some nonfiction reading goals. The one big nonfiction reading goal that I do have, that I started when I talked about when I started this channel and I still haven't really fulfilled yet, is to read more nonfiction that talks about artists, the art world, the art market, art history, and incorporate more of those videos onto my channel. There aren't a lot of artists who are talking about those type of art books, and I think that it would be a really great addition to Booktube to include more biographies specifically about artists, writers as well, but for me it's more visual artists. And so that is one of my nonfiction reading goals for 2020, is to make more videos about artist biographies, because I think there are so many fascinating artists that have great biographies written about them, and more people should be reading them and talking about them. Number 10 is advice for other people about how to incorporate more nonfiction into their reading. And Olive's video for this and a lot of other people's that I've watched have given some great recommendations, and so I'm not going to repeat them here. My only additional recommendation is that I'd like to say that if any of you are really into podcasts and listening to podcasts, I think listening to audio books, audio nonfiction is probably going to be up your alley. If you struggle to read nonfiction but you love listening to podcasts, get the books on audio, because I feel that listening to nonfiction on audio is pretty much the same as listening to a podcast. Obviously, it's not a 10-15 minute experience. It is a multi-hour experience. The other thing about audiobooks is that if you get one of the apps, the Libby app or whatever app your library system uses for audiobooks, my library actually uses 3 different apps for their audiobooks, so I never know which app I'm going to find it on if they say they have an audio version. I find that to be so accessible, because I know that Audible is quite expensive and most people maybe can't afford subscription services, but your libraries do have audiobooks available, so have a look into it. And if you're into podcasts and you want to read more nonfiction, this is a great way to get more of it into your reading. Bonus is to talk about any nonfiction booktubers that you really love. I tend to get a lot of good recommendation for memoirs from Mel's Bookland Adventures, from Mercy's Bookish Musings. I know I got a great recommendation recently from Josie the Reading Witch for Girls to the Front, which is another book that I'm reading this month. So thanks so much for joining me today to talk about nonfiction. I hope that all of you are having a really great month reading nonfiction if that's what you're doing. And I hope to make more videos pertaining to nonfiction books in the future and do some more reviews and some more recommendations. And I will be back again soon with another video.